Welcome to Frameworks for Growth, where we explore the systems, frameworks, and tools that the world's leading founders, operators, and investors use to build and scale. I'm Christina Cacioppo, co-founder and CEO of Vanta, and I'm here today with Synthesia's COO and co-founder, Steffen Tjerrild. Thanks for being here today.
Thank you very much for having me.
So for those unfamiliar, could you tell us a little bit about Synthesia?
Sure. Yeah, so Synthesia is now the world's largest AI video platform for enterprises. We allow customers to kind of produce videos with computers and not with cameras and microphones and actors, but actually kind of, taking video creation into the 21st century by allowing companies to kind of produce content behind their desk. And that is like just a very kind of, incredible way for companies to kind of scale their video production, right? I think we all live in this kind of video first world. Everything we do in our private lives is very media and very rich media. But when we come into work, especially in the biggest enterprises in the world today, right, it's very much PDFs, PowerPoints, emails, Word documents, and there's just a starker and starker difference between how companies, how much content they want to produce and how much they actually produce. And also as the new generation coming into the workforce that is demanding more kind of interactive and more engaging forms of communication, that is just becoming the norm, and companies are craving new ways to kind of, keep up with that kind of content needs.
Very neat. And you're at the forefront of AI video production. What are some things you're excited about in tech today?
I think there's so many kind of, very exciting things, and especially with LLMs are just incredibly magical technology. And I think there's going to be a forest of incredible new small companies and companies being produced out of this. And I think we're really excited to just take this new level of reasoning that kind of computers are starting to grasp, and really kind of, crafting that into kind of new experiences with Synthesia, right? So it's just an incredible kind of time to be alive. And I think also with the scale and resources that we have as a company, I think we're in pole position to leverage a lot of these kind of breakthroughs. And I think for us, right, we've kind of been going at the company for many years now, but we still feel we are 10 or 15% into the roadmap of kind of creating Hollywood style kind of videos on a laptop, which was our initial tagline many years ago. And we used to say that was 10 years away. I think we're actually going to be more close to that in the coming years. And so we were pretty kind of right on that prediction. But yeah, I think there's just incredible kind of, opportunity ahead, especially as kind of LLMs become incredibly magical to kind of, allow new kind of, techniques and workflows and experiences to come to life.
The idea of text to video sort of wasn't a thing before you all, but you all believed in it. What did you see?
I think we probably have raised a lot more money early on in our journey if we had our crafted vision for where this kind of, category was morphing into. But I think we had at least the kind of, the crazy kind of moment when we saw this kind of, technologies for the first time back in the fall of 2016, where the professor, one of the co-founders of Synthesia, called Professor Matthias Niesner, for the first time showcased a paper called Face to Face, which was the kind of, the precursor of these technologies that was kind of, coming on the back of the VR hype cycle back in 2016. Where a lot of like deep learning, computer graphics, computer vision really kind of coming together to enable some of these things. And when Victor and myself saw this, it was like an incredible kind of glimpse into the future of content creation. I don't think we had like the foresight to see the product expression that it has today, but it was at least crazy enough for us to quit our jobs and pursue this idea.
And so you all saw this, but kind of everyone else missed it. I'm like sort of overstating, but I'm sort of not. Like, what did everybody else miss that you all understood?
I'm not sure we kind of understood everything. I think it's easy to kind of draw the lines and the dots in the back rear mirror. But I think what we saw and what we had conviction about and what people had misunderstood is that there is just a long tail of people that want to create video but can't do it today, right? I think the biggest invention in video production has been our cameras that we have on our phone, but it's still inherently physical, right? You have to kind of put that up. You still have kind of, actors and studios and these type of things, right? And actually digitizing that motion, a bit similar to how other creative disciplines has kind of been disrupted by technology. If you go back 20 years, right, you needed to kind of record everything and kind of, for music production, right? that used to be in like, recording in a $10 million LA recording studio. Today, you can kind of synthesize any tune in the universe on your laptop, and every kind of music and hot top charting hit today is kind of synthesized with computers and not with physical instruments. And we just saw that, of course, video is going to be on the same path, and video is going to allow us to kind of produce content behind our laptops and less with a smarter or faster kind of physical production process, right? And I think this starting point with avatars, they kind of felt pretty odd, because if you're kind of speaking to investors and consumers and customers, right, they're kind of thinking, oh, they like look janky or robotic and these type of things. But if you compare it to text, right, that is kind of where you have to compare it. You don't have to compare it with hundreds of millions of dollars in visual effects budgets from Hollywood. And that is kind of the market, net new kind of video creators versus existing creators, right? And that's also a little bit or like the attraction we have in the companies today, right? It's less about making the video department 10 times more effective. It is to make all the consultants in your consultancy video producers, not for every PowerPoint, but for every 10th PowerPoint, right? Maybe make a video because it's more engaging, it's more intuitive to kind of disseminate information through video.
You mentioned kind of clouds over the category. When did it feel like those lifted a bit, or like when did other people start to get it more?
I think we were actually growing really fast even before ChatGPT. So we launched like the first version of the product back in 2020, in summer of 2020, and we had like a lot of acceleration there. People couldn't hire crews, people couldn't actually kind of do video production, but we were actually kind of growing really fast. And I think after ChatGPT landed, like, in early 23, right, we just saw like a huge acceleration, right? AI became on everybody's lips. Everybody had to do things with AI, and Synthesia was just in a very like great position that here's 5 things beyond ChatGPT you can do, and Synthesia was one of them, right? So we had just had like this crazy kind of lift off in terms of like the pull in the market, and it also becomes much more accepted that, oh, using avatars, using videos in your customer communication, in your internal training, so forth, was just becoming much more of a standard back then, yeah.
And at Synthesia, you're COO, which is a role I think probably it can be so many things, so it tends to be a little misunderstood, I think. Can you is there like a decision you made recently that was really impactful that people outside the company wouldn't know about? And I kind of use this to try to understand, like, what does COO mean?
Yeah, I think CEO in Synthesia context is probably all the rest. It's kind of encapsulating a lot of the things, right? The lineage between Victor, my other co-founder, and myself is that he's kind of more product R&D, typically painting the story to the outside world, where I'm typically behind the camera, and sitting with operations, sales, and finance has kind of been typically running into me, right? Where Victor thinks about the future, I'm thinking about the present and reporting a bit on the past. A recent example, I don't know if it's like a good one, but I think we had like this idea. Okay, Synthesia is super simple tool. It's very inviting. It's designed for people who's never created videos before, so it's kind of by purpose pretty easy and inviting tool. But we realized that, okay, even though that might be easy for tech natives, when we're selling into the biggest companies in the world, that's typically relying on third parties, consultants, agencies to kind of do a lot of the execution and process orientation in the big companies. We kind of launched and implemented a lot of like services. Even though the tool is relatively simple, we saw that actually going in and helping our customers crafting the first kind of video library for some of their use cases. So implementing like our services team was kind of, a decision we made that I think is kind of really starting to kind of pay off, where we kind of, have template designers going in and taking customers kind of brand guidelines and creating video assets that allows them to kind of just find value quicker. Where I think we tech nerds are just like very much like, oh, it's just go in, it's super easy, you'll figure it out yourself, right? But actually having the appreciation for more primarily a senior kind of, work professional in the enterprise doesn't have like the same kind of, attitude to just jump in and kind of pick new technologies and new techniques up.
How did you build out that team? Like, what sort of folks did you hire? What were you looking for?
Yeah, so we're kind of looking at other kind of, technology companies, right? That has kind of been kind of, more technical than ours, and kind of, how do you actually craft that kind of, services arm that really allows like the company. And here it's less about building like a profit center, right? It's not about that, oh, we're going to sell services and we're going to be a strong kind of P&L line item for us. It's more about how can we set these accounts up for long-term success, and less about like, okay, let's maximize some short-term willingness to pay for implementation and services, but how can we actually set this account up for not even just in year 1, but in year 3 and 5. If we can accelerate those learnings over 6 to 9 months, instead of the customer will eventually find those over 18 or 24. I think that was a little bit, okay, this kind of clicks. Doing things that doesn't scale, and also for us in such a new category with customers that want to pull the product in many different directions, actually allowing them to, oh, you'll figure it out with our API, actually going a bit deeper with our customers and trying to understand, okay, so what is the integrations you want to make? What is the last mile distribution you want of these videos? And actually going a little bit deeper with our customers and building with them to enable these kind of net new use cases and net new kind of experiences that they have not been doing before.
And did these kind of net new experiences your customers build, how do you get that information back to your product teams?
Yeah, so we're kind of building, we kind of working. We're lucky to kind of having a lot of kind of big customers, and we work with 70% of Fortune 100 now, which is an amazing kind of position to be in, right? And I think just to kind of back up before I'm answering that question, we've kind of been through different kind of phases as a company, where I think the first years of the company were a research first company. Can we actually build a technology where you can type in text and we'll get a person to say that? That was the first kind of milestone. And can we actually make a scalable kind of offering around that? And once we kind of broke through and actually kind of had the technical kind of breakthrough to allow this, we had to kind of build a product around it. Our next realization was, okay, there's more to video than just somebody talking to you. There's animations, transitions, music, all these things that actually makes a video engaging. So then we built a full video editor around the technology that allowed customers to build end-to-end videos inside Synthesia instead of exporting to other kind of video apps. And that allowed us to kind of build a really strong kind of application that people love today. And that was just an incredible long roadmap to get to a feature parity with kind of a common kind of video editor in the cloud, right? You can imagine the long list of features with drop shadows and animations and custom fonts and all these things. And then the last kind of chapter that we're entering now is kind of being much more customer first. Sounds odd as a company, being customer first after 7 years. But I think now we actually, the biggest mode and the biggest kind of advantage we have is actually the distribution, the trust that we've built in the enterprise, and actually allowing us to sit at the table and allow us customers. They are asking us, how can we solve this problem with AI video? How can we solve that problem with AI video, right? And I think it's just giving us a unique position to allow us to build with these customers and leveraging that with our kind of services team to kind of go that extra mile, understanding the nuances of that use case and that kind of application, right? And the way we feed it back is kind of on like an aggregate level. It's kind of a really kind of big initiative for the company. So actually also sitting with the entire C-suite, from product to our CRO to CEO, and reviewing, oh, this company want to do this. They're also trying to kind of find, there's a lot of like nuances that customers want to have a very specific things, and trying to kind of dissect, is this a customer A kind of situation, or is this actually something that's more broadly? And that's obviously, that's also the hard questions, right?
And as you're kind of doing this, right, and you're talking through it, you're like defining a new category, and that sounds so cool, especially from the outside, right? Like the stuff of founder dreams, but you're actually doing it. How cool is it actually? Like pros, cons.
It's a blessing and a curse, right? I think when it works, it's obviously amazing, and I think that's also why all the founders are here and a lot of the early employees are still here, is that you're kind of riding the wave of this kind of white space. You're not like rip and replace existing vendors. You're creating a kind of net new market, which is obviously amazing, right? But it's also a challenge, right? Because there's not currently a line item in most companies that says AI video. So there is obviously kind of a lot of like trade-offs here, but I think it's exciting because it's also an exciting technology. I think even though that the technicalities and the deep AI that we kind of built behind it to enable these things is very complex, the actual output is very simple, right? David Beckham can't speak Japanese, and allowing him to do that, even my mom understands that. And I think that's like a very cool part of like the technology, that we can kind of express something very simple and so intuitive that most people understand, or can type in text and get this person to say that and create a video around it. That's crazy, right? And that's like, the beautiful thing. And I think it's also coming a little bit back to if I had to kind of start a company again, right? I think I love this saying that it's easy to build a hard company and it's hard to build an easy company, in the sense that when you're actually kind of setting out to build Hollywood style movies on your laptop, then you also get a very different kind of talent pool that want to be a part of that mission, want to be a part of that journey. And especially as two younger business co-founders at the time with no credentials in AI at all, I think it helped us to actually have some sort of an offering to these amazing people that could go and work at Fang, right, and get like triple the compensation that we could offer them at the time, but actually having a pretty crazy idea of, guys, we're going to try to kind of make Hollywood style movies on a laptop, right? That allowed us to kind of tap into a different talent pool and get more missionaries along that actually was here for the right reasons and want to kind of, was inspired by that. Versus if you're building accounting software number 500 incrementally with maybe some AI, you will probably get more of a transactional kind of, employer-employee relationship and people just coming for this paycheck, right? It's not like that there's a crazy mission or objective that you're trying to set out to do.
And when you talk about like the crazy mission of an objective of Synthesia, how do you talk about it?
I think it's like evolving a lot over the years. And I think there might be some companies where the mission is just very enduring through the entire, but I think also as AI just enable more and more things that you couldn't even think about a few years ago, I think we're kind of morphing more into, we started with this kind of Hollywood style kind of vision back when we started the company. I think we morphed in much more to kind of, business knowledge and actually kind of, sitting and helping customers being much more effective in their communication and their knowledge sharing, right? If that is internal or it's external with their customers, right? Information is just getting harder and harder to disseminate, especially when the attention spans is going like this. Having the ability to kind of, allow our customers to drive higher kind of and more effective communication in all their channels is kind of much more the kind of direction of travel that we're going in now.
When people talk about AI, there's obviously a lot of excitement. And then there are kind of challenges that are more specific to AI. So like things I've heard are worrying about deepfakes or accuracy of the models, like David Beckham speaking Japanese, great. David Beckham, maybe, I don't know, yelling at your grandmother with curse words, less great. Like no one wants that. How do you prevent that? And then people also talk about just like the cost and the cost of goods and the financing required. What's another challenge of building an AI that maybe we talk about a little bit less?
I think definitely like the ethics side of things, right? I think AI is a different type of vendor than like a traditional kind of software vendor from historic process, right? Both from security, the ethics, the kind of principles that they're training the models and so forth, right? So this is something Synthesia has been thinking a lot about and kind of incorporating into the company since day one. So that is something that we think also customers and companies will think even more about in the future as it becomes more prevalent and people will care about who they partner with, right? Especially in this era of kind of, where data and the gold that kind of companies and the IP that they hold is kind of, being more challenged by a lot of the kind of vendorships that we see.
And actually to that, you all have an AI framework, if I'm correct, with like consent, control, collaboration. How does that manifest? And, like what's like a specific decision you made with that framework?
We had the framework in place from day one of the company, and it was very important for us to kind of, set the standard of this. We knew these technologies was incredible controversial when we started out, so we wanted to kind of build a framework that allowed our customers, our partners, to feel that we're in good hands and we take this very seriously. And very just to kind of, go through the different C's, right? I think consent. There was no regulation at the time. There was no like laws that says we couldn't do anything. But we were just like, okay, it probably makes sense that you can't just take somebody's face and make them say something they haven't said before. So we made this kind of, framework explicit consent. So all actors, all people on the platform, all personal avatars have to go through and give explicit consent to the fact that they will be part of the Synthesia platform. And here, right, a lot of our competitors made maybe cheap kind of, celebrities, not necessarily maliciously, but like for fun or for awareness or for PR and so forth, actually just taking like a politician or a celebrity and make them say something funny. And we've just never done that because we kind of, had like a pretty hard line around it has to give explicit consent. And the amount of times over the years where it's very benign, but like people want to kind of do a video with a deceased actor or something for even for a good cause, we just always just said no, even though that it might have kind of made some short-term kind of awareness and PR, but we've just always said no, right, to that. And I think like, the next one around control, we're also pretty harsh on content moderation, which is kind of, making sure our platform is not being used for bad, right? And I think here it's actually kind of the red content is pretty easy to kind of filter out, right? Profanity, hate speech, these type of things are actually pretty easy. There's more like the gray content, right? Which is kind of, the hard part. So we actually employ a big part of the company is kind of human moderators that is actually moderating the content. And here, I'm glad we're not like a free speech platform or something where we have to kind of have very kind of, liberal kind of guidelines around this. We can be very strict, right? We work with enterprises, and our enterprise customers also want to make sure that their employees is not creating content that is not on their brand guidelines and so forth. So this is actually turning into like, competitive advantage as well, that companies are feeling more safe, that they're in safer hands, that we're kind of protecting their brand when they're kind of using Synthesia to kind of, create video. And collaboration, right? I think one thing is Synthesia being not misused. Another thing is kind of internet scale. How is these technologies being kind of leveraged for good, and like how's the harm minimized? So also been doing a lot of work with governments and media organizations on awareness, but also the big tech giants, right? Where how can we actually kind of, get to a media reality in a few years where we can kind of trust the content and so forth.
And did that, like, there was nothing, kind of no regulation, nothing when you started. If you were, I don't know, master of the universe and had a magic wand, and there was like one guideline, even you could wave your wand and make happen.
I think our kind of framework is kind of pretty simple. It's trying to use common sense around these technologies, and that's not to be too political, but I think that's how most regulation should be. That's just kind of coming down to sensible common sense. Of course, you should not be able to take somebody's face without their consent and make them say things they shouldn't say. And I think some sort of standard kind of, upholding of content moderation around like, the standard kind of, free speech principles that's also governing. You can't just say everything just because there's kind of free speech, right? Just kind of, principles around that is also kind of interesting, right? And I think the way we're taking control to a next level, right? You can see Synthesia as a canvas, and you can kind of, write pretty bad things inside Word or even in PowerPoint, right? We're actually moderating it at the creation level, where all moderation today happens at the distribution layer, right? Which is on the distribution platforms. But we are actually doing it before it gets any distribution at all. And that's obviously a next, even like further step to kind of, make sure the platform is extra secure.
And do you do that in partnership with your customers? Is there like a level you do kind of outside of even what a customer might have explicitly told you? Like, how do you think about that?
Yeah, it is also, in the LLM is changing this a lot, but we're pretty excited about also allowing our customers to kind of control this a bit more on their side as their LLMs is becoming more sophisticated. And one thing is kind of, on the kind of content moderation per se, but if you're a big company, right, you want to make sure your employees is talking the same way about the product. That could also be governed on kind of, the moderation layer. So when you're trying to talk about this product, hey, this is actually not how we talk about it. This is the kind of standard phrasing or the standard acronym for this business unit or whatnot, allowing the companies to kind of unify the communication and share the same language, which just becomes extremely hard at scale. And that is a lot of the kind of customer feedback we see today, right? A customer is like, yeah, it's great, but how can we make sure that we speak the same language around the world? How do we have the best practices around the world in a more kind of uniform manner? Right?
And you're sitting at the intersection of like content, AI, identity, seeing a lot. What's something the rest of us aren't talking about as much as we should be?
That's a good question. I think there's been happening a lot on like kind of security and like that kind of path. I think is definitely evolving, and people are taking more that serious of who do you kind of share your data with. One thing is kind of what is their kind of security and kind of compliance controls, but who is the owners of the company? Where do they come from? All these things is kind of a next level deeper of how you kind of making sure that you're in bed with kind of partners that you want to kind of build a relationship with, right? So I think that's kind of increasing. I think just generally AI is obviously on everybody's lips, but I think people are also sometimes inflating or jumping to the end state. I think most people can kind of imagine the perfect chatbot that just answers your questions exactly how you want it or retrieves the exact information that you're asking for, right? But I think reality is just, and humans and companies and businesses are just still very messy, right? Data is just very siloed, it's very disorganized still. And I still think that we need to kind of, sequence our ways to a lot of these kind of, magical outcomes that everybody can imagine, but actually kind of, realizing there is a lot of ROI today, but how can we actually build a sequence, right, to get there? And it's hard to kind of sometimes just jump the fence to the end state. You have to actually build a lot of things to be able to kind of, get there eventually.
Yeah. Synthesia was built in Europe, and as we're talking in 2025, seems to be more likely to be a forefront for AI regulation than the U.S. Building in Europe is a helpful constraint, something else. How do you think about it?
It's not something we're like thinking a lot about, to be honest. I think obviously we want to kind of be in an environment where it's encouraged to kind of build big AI companies, and that kind of coming with some sort of frameworks that we need, right? But I think the UK is out of the EU now, and it's kind of taking a slight different stance to the rest of Europe. But I think our kind of view of the world is that there's amazing people in Europe and very ambitious people as well. I think there's less that have kind of seen the last mile on that like really big scale that a lot of the kind of West Coast companies have. But I think the ambition level and like the talent density, and I think also the talent loyalty in Europe is relatively higher, all things equal. So I think we have been generally happy, and I think especially the first 3 years of the company, that was just a really, really rough patch. If we were like a standard kind of, company in the valley and there was like 5 other kind of cool things around the corner, who knows, right? I think we'll probably have a hard time kind of retaining those great AI people back then that allowed us to actually kind of make those breakthroughs in the beginning. So I think we're kind of generally happy. Of course, we want like a kind of environment that encourages us to kind of, build and stay here. And I think we are kind of well supported so far.
Last night, actually, even at a just company event, we were talking with Europeans who are moved to the US for a few years, but like they really want to live in Europe. And so having a set of companies they can join and like feel that they're both like pushing their career forward and living where they want to does feel like a neat talent advantage.
Yeah, totally. And we've also kind of been lucky to attract some great kind of operators from America that's kind of migrating over here the other way. So that's also been helpful to allow us to kind of have people and executives that have kind of seen that like really, really big scale, which is exciting.
And what's your pitch to Americans to come over here?
I think Europe has a lot to offer, and I think it's like a cool kind of experience. And I think kind of the cities are amazing in Europe. I think that's generally something that kind of attracts a lot of American. I think London and Paris is kind of also very idolized. So my wife is American, so I've been been able to kind of convince her to come over here as well, and she's never gonna come back. But yeah, so.
Well, you all build your own models, correct? With that, like, where do you think about differentiation?
I think it's a good question and something we're asking ourselves on a constant level, right? But I think we see it ultimately as a kind of go-to-market advantage in terms of time and scale, right? Where we also have a very specific kind of customer and outcome in mind, and it's less just a foundational model that has to kind of cater for everything. We have a very specific user and a very specific use case in mind, so we're also very much building for that kind of particular workflow and those kind of constraints that those kind of use cases have. And I think we're actually pretty pragmatic about it. I think a few years ago, there was nobody else that actually had avatars. We kind of invented that category. So we're actually the enabling technology for us to actually have a claim to fame and building the company around that advantage. I think relatively that kind of advantage is going down as kind of, all kind of technologies getting more and more commodified over time, right? So we see ourselves as less of a foundational company, more like an applied company. And I think eventually when big companies or open source comes out with crazy kind of new things, we will kind of get into a spot eventually where there will just be something we integrate into our user experience, right? our customers is not buying an AI model from us, right? They're buying a workflow. They're building an experience. They're building like a workflow tool that works for them to address a particular use case. An avatar is just an ingredient of that, but actually the user experience, the integrations, the last mile support and distribution of the video, and enabling kind of net new integrations and experiences with video is kind of where the value is and what the customer is buying from us.
And a lot of folks now talk about data as like a competitive advantage in AI. What's your take on that?
Yeah, I think so. I think especially for AI and for like, language models or voice models and stuff like that, I think the data is definitely expressing kind of, the model capabilities, right, to an extent. And I think that is definitely going to be where incumbents is going to have a big advantage over like newcomers, right? Because they sit on a lot of proprietary data that is not just online scrapable that a lot of these kind of LLM companies has been doing, right? So I think that is definitely something we see, and that's also something we are doing a lot about, right? Where we, to my point earlier, right, we have very specific use cases. We care about human presenters in video. So that is a very kind of, narrow kind of, at least a confined domain of content that we need to kind of, specialize and be the best at in the world. So kind of curating, buying. We just did a deal with Shutterstock where we're buying a lot of their content, allowing us to kind of train models on this. We have been hiring Broadway actors to kind of, what does a great performance look like in video. We had a $5 million kind of, volumetric capture studio here in London, creating the highest fidelity data set for how does humans perform in video. So we've kind of been doing a lot to kind of curate and build the best data set for this in the world, and I think that will be a differentiator, especially in the short to the medium time.
Right. And a lot of AI, and maybe especially when you think about characters, it like could lean toward novelty or could feel really in the novelty camp. How much of that do you want to avoid? How do you avoid it if you do?
I think the first 3 years of the company, which was very much going through the product market fit desert, really allowed us to kind of have the conviction when we actually found something that worked, to not get carried away with these kind of innovation potholes or getting too carried away with cool and novelty ideas. And I think we've had this saying as a company, right, that utility over novelty, and just been extremely focused on the utility that we as a company are providing today, not tomorrow, not in 6 months, not in 2 years. What is the absolute highest value of the product today? And that has kind of been guiding our go-to-market efforts and our focus, right? Where I think it's very easy to get carried away, especially if you're a young founder and just trying to kind of, get some traction or find some customer that want to buy from you. And I think those first 3 years of going in through the idea maze and really kind of, trying many different things and failing a lot of different things just gave us that absolute conviction. Okay, let's focus on this. Let's double down on this. We have a customer base that loves us, and not get carried too much away, right? And I think that's all about like sequencing this, and also kind of, when is the technology next gate? What is the fringes of the technology that can kind of, be the next TAM of expansion or the next kind of, use cases for these technologies?
When you were like wandering through the desert in the idea maze, and when did you know you had something?
It was pretty instant. I think once we actually just launched the self-service offering around, it was just instant kind of product market fit. And I think we obviously had like no idea who's going to use this and who's going to, be things. We obviously had some hypotheses, but it was just very clear that there was like this long tail of people that has never had the means or the ability to kind of create content before. And that was kind of, just like incredible to kind of find that and double down on that and building for that, listening to them to kind of, refine the offering. And I think the first thing when we launched the product was a kind of avatar clip generator. You can kind of generate a clip with an avatar. But then the next was, okay, let's build the editor around it that sits around that, right? And I think one of the other kind of, interesting things and product decisions we have made, or many product decisions, is around like the paradigm for generated media is very different than camera recorded content. So we have just been building and making a lot of kind of product decision. What does it actually mean when there's not a physical timeline, when the content is not recorded from A to B, when it's not physical kind of content that is with physical sensors, right? And we already have all the kind of, amazing infrastructure to work with camera recorded content, right? And also the amazing distribution online and and hosting capabilities and so forth. But what does it actually mean when every pixel in the video is software rendered as opposed to kind of sensor captured? And that has kind of allowed us to build a lot of kind of unique innovations around how do you work with this, right? When you're not confined by kind of the old paradigm. And that's also why we had the conviction that this could actually get pretty big, because a lot of the kind of incumbents of kind of camera recorded content are still kind of working in that paradigm and all their innovators dilemma around that. And I think that's kind of where we're so bullish that we actually have an air gap among like the big companies to kind of build a really big category around this. Because we think there's so many new things that can be enabled by these technologies.
So you studied business in Denmark, moved to Zambia, started some businesses in mining and logistics and chickens. I have it right. You've also spent some time on the west coast of the U.S. But like, what'd you learn about entrepreneurship with Zambian chickens that the west coast kind of misses?
I think, yeah, maybe just to back up a little bit.
You want to go straight to the Zambian chickens?
Yeah, so kind of coming from Denmark, used to go to school there, studied in the US as well. But having like also a pretty big foothold in kind of, the Danish startup ecosystem, also where I know Victor, my co-founder, we started in this kind of, incubator that starts companies. We learned a lot what not to do when you're building companies. So there was some great learnings there. But we saw that we were complementing each other really well. Our kind of Venn diagram was pretty like low in the overlap. We had very similar kind of, grandiose ambition, but we didn't have like a lot of the same skill sets. He's more technical and more of an artist, and I'm more like the executor and kind of the finance background. But then after I graduated, the most crazy thing I could think of was to go to Africa, and I was lucky enough to kind of have an opportunity to go to Zambia, work in a regional investment firm down there. And I learned a lot about kind of, resiliency and the hardship of building companies in very kind of adverse environments. So that was just an incredible kind of experience. It's not too many generative AI companies at the time, but it was definitely an incredible experience, and 2 amazing years of my life where I was looking and investing and operating everything to your point, chicken farms to mining supply chain and microfinance and so forth.
And I know this isn't entirely a focus now, but if you were to apply some like text to video and AI like to your prior life in Zambia, like what would you do? What stands out?
I think there's obviously like some educational gaps in Africa, and I think having video as a medium to kind of bridge some of these kind of literacy rates, I think is a great way to potentially leverage the technology to kind of scale up and skill up kind of the general population around different topics and around different kind of principles. That is something we're thinking about, and we are working with actually NGOs that is producing content with the platform to some of these kind of regions. Yeah.
And as you were then, so after the chickens, came up with a bunch of ideas, and we got to like idea maze, wandering in the desert. Like, did it have to be that long? Did you have to ship stuff to learn? Like when you look back on that, you're like, what advice would you have for someone in the idea desert now?
I think we probably could have done it like maybe 6 to 9 months quicker than the 3 years, but I don't think more than that. It was like literally a technical breakthrough that we needed to actually enable the product, and we were the only company in the world that could do that at the time. I think if we had that clear focus on that kind of clear end goal initially, we could probably have done it faster and work more kind of guided towards that outcome. But I think it was a bit like, just serendipity that we kind of, managed to stay alive, which was, we were pretty close to death a few times, but I actually managed to stay alive to see the day of light, to actually see this kind of product to kind of come to life, right? So yeah, that was pretty hard.
How'd you stay alive? Why didn't you die?
I think just never give up. I think it was just there was too much on the line. We were like young people. We were both very young at the time, trying to just we were also living together. So it was pretty hard time, but I think it was just like this fear of letting people down, investors, employees, and just trying to kind of go through day by day.
And is there, like, before raising money, is there something you think all founders should do, many founders should do?
I think they should definitely use all their own money. Yeah, I had the credit on all my credit cards and everything until we kind of landed the first financing round. And I think we see that there is maybe a little bit of a spoiling of like the earlier generation that, oh, we can just raise around, blah, blah, blah. But actually kind of going through and showing that you're all in, you've quit your job, you've spent all your money, you've kind of gone to the kind of, edges of where you can actually do it. That shows the commitment, the actual kind of, you're all in, and shows that you have the grit, you have actually the hardship that it takes to really do. So I think that's a simple and but very hard kind of advice to take. But I feel like that probably more should do that.
Okay, and I both agree to that, but why is that important? Sometimes I have trouble like articulating it.
I think it just shows that you are gonna do this at all costs because that's what it takes. This is gonna be the easiest part to deplete your bank account. The hardest part is to kind of actually get financing, operate a team, kind of building a company, right? That is just extremely hard. And I think if this is already kind of thing where you don't want to kind of cross the line of what it actually takes, then that's probably that's an early sign of where are you not willing to kind of compromise your life because it's gonna take over everything that you do. And it's going to take every waking hour of your life and even your sleeping hours as well. So I think just showing that commitment and understanding that this is what it takes, this is probably like, a principle, or at least, a lesson that you have to take on early.
Yeah. Is it something you look for when you're investing in Southern Africa? Consciously or not?
Probably subconsciously. I think it's hard to kind of really test that with those kind of, pretty transactional kind of, relationships that you have, or at least like when it's not people that you truly know, right? But yeah, I think it's something I probably should think more about when I'm angel investing, at least.
And you angel invest now?
Yeah.
Anything in particular that you look for?
The crazier, the better. I think that's typically where I think incremental type of things could be interesting and can probably create a good business on it. But I think trying to kind of, push the humanity and pushing the boundaries of what's possible to the next level, I think is what excites me.
Yeah. Kind of similarly, it's like there's a lot of B2B software, and it's great. I like B2B software, but I spend a lot of my time thinking about it. It's kind of nice to hear about something that's more like asteroid mining on the moon sort of thing.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, you operate on the bleeding edge of AI. What's something in your life you do totally manually? Smoke signals. Maybe.
At work or privately?
Either way.
I still have my one-on-ones in person. It's not yet my avatar or my voice agent that is conducting those. Yeah. But I like I bike a lot as well. So I think simple things like that is still something that we as humans are getting gratitude of doing stuff, simple things.
I know you're a Strava person when you cycle.
Yeah, a little bit.
Yeah. Favorite segment?
Not yet. I'm not that of a Strava person.
What are you reading right now?
I've been reading Bill Walsh, Skull Take Care of Itself, which I think is kind of coming a lot with my personality of like, if you just take one step at a time and focusing on the right things, the outcomes and the things will eventually kind of appear, and not get too carried away, right? And I think it's a cliche, right? But I think also the journey is kind of the fun. You have to kind of enjoy the day ins and day outs of kind of doing this and doing it with great people. And then eventually, if you continue to do the right things and focus on optimizing the right things, the score and whatever kind of KPIs and metrics that you're measuring will eventually kind of go that way as well.
Yeah. And when you think actually that, like that perspective then applied to company building, is there like a founder or an operator who you think does that super well?
Big admiration. Stripe founders are investors in Synthesia. They've obviously been executing extremely well and kind of doing also with their own kind of principles, and they're hard in it as well. And it seems like they kind of also been obviously incredibly hard, but also kind of been doing it with their own like soul in it. And I feel like that can kind of be felt through it. That's a good one. And yeah.
Did you have to like kind of rewire yourself or folks who work at Synthesia to be like 100% retention is not the goal? Even though, we all went through school where 100% was always the goal.
I think it's obviously something you also have with investors and outside people, right? And comparing you to benchmarks and these type of things. which is obviously helpful and interesting. But I think to my point earlier, right, if you're actually kind of, striving for 100% retention, you're probably not ambitious enough and you're not like pushing the technology to where the edge is. But I think it's obviously a very critical piece, and that is where the true kind of weighing machine of a technology or company is. It's less about the initial buy, because there's a lot of like loose money, especially in AI today. People are very willing to try stuff. But on your kind of 1 year renewal, right, that's typically where the true kind of, sentiment, was this just a fun pilot and a test? Or is this actually meaningfully valuable for me that I want to kind of, continue to use and build value on, right? So I think it is a very important metric to kind of drive your business around. But I think you can also be too over-focused on it. And if you are not granular on that churn or retention, I think you can also get too blinded around like a headline number that maybe looks lower than standard. But if you kind of granular look at it, is this like a super core ICP, or is this a fringe kind of, marketing use case that we've never seen before? We're not going to turn that customer away. We're going to say, hey, cool, try that out. But we also gonna not be as upset or so surprised if that use case maybe not materialize, because that's kind of, maybe on the fringe of what the tech can do today.
And when you think about operating the business, are there a couple of metrics that you pay a lot of attention to?
I think obviously our retention is important, but I think our net retention is extremely important as a business, especially in the biggest companies that we operate with, where we are just like want to see more and more teams kind of picking it up, right, and want to kind of, go more wall to wall with our customers, where it is still very much kind of bottoms up technology, right, where we are solving a lot of kind of user pain. We're in the process of kind of maturing from user pain to business pain, where as a PLG company, right, solving like individual users' pain. Hey, I used to produce this material with a camera. Now we can do it cheaper and faster with AI video, right? That's great. But attaching that to kind of strategic business outcomes that budget holders, decision makers are really sitting on, that is kind of a journey that we're on, right? And that's kind of, something we want to kind of working hard on how to kind of go into more senior people, right? They don't care about if it's video or text or message birds that is delivering the messages. Yeah. They are caring about their customer support tickets are being deflected more because you're now using video versus text, right? They care about if their product marketing is more effective, so you can better cross-selling. The sales enablement team cares about ramp time, if you can compress that with video, right? That is something they care about, and so forth.
When you think back on the last 7 or 8 years of Synthesia, what's something that like felt like it was a really big deal at the time, and in retrospect was kind of nothing?
I think funding rounds is often like, feels like this end all be all moment, right? But I think it's essentially just the means to kind of know executing on your vision and mission, right? And I think they're obviously important, but I think they're obviously overstated. I think they're a little bit overhyped in kind of, especially for more senior and seasoned entrepreneurs. Yeah. But I think that's probably something that you overstate the kind of the importance of. Of course, you need capital if you're having ambitious goals and need capital to do that, right? But yeah, I think it's typically overstated. But I think it's also the other way, right? I think things are rarely as bad as they initially seem, and they're rarely as great as they initially seems as well. Yeah. So I think we as humans are oscillating in these kind of highs and ultra lows all the time, but the actual kind of, is rarely as bad or rarely as great as it initially.
Also true. Then in the moment, yeah. Is there something though that like when it happened again kind of didn't feel like anything, and in retrospect actually an important decision or an outcome or win or loss?
I think when you're like losing potentially big customers, that obviously happens when you're kind of, forming a new category and these type of things. That can feel like a huge blow and the company is over and we're never going to win that logo back or whatever. I think in the grand scheme of things, this is also just the nature of building a category and trying to kind of take the technology to the edge of what's possible. And I think if you have 100% retention in a category, you're probably not ambitious enough, especially when you're kind of forming a new thing.
Yeah.
But in the grand scheme of things, is also just maturing you to, okay, this is probably great that we shouldn't kind of support that particular thing they wanted to build or something like that, right?
Yeah. Well, Thank you so much today for this conversation on everything from AI to building in Europe to Zambian chickens. Again, I had a lot of fun.
Yeah, likewise, Christina. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. We hope you found this conversation as enlightening as we did. If you're interested for more about Frameworks for Growth or Vanta, you can find us at vanta.com and Vanta across all social channels. Thanks so much.